I'm Bruce Apar, and you're watching Frank Talks with Bruce the Blog. Oh, that took a while. Frank Talks with Bruce the Blog is brought to you by Chase Media Group, publisher of Penny Saver and also multimedia provider of omni-channel solutions for a multimedia marketplace. And we also like to remind you that you can see the show on YouTube. Actually, you can see all the shows on YouTube going back a couple of years. If you go on YouTube and simply search for TownLink TV or even under my name, Bruce the Blog or Bruce Apar, you can find a lot of the past shows. And we also always like to remind viewers, many of whom maybe are seeing this for the first time, that Frank Talks with Bruce the Blog aims to bring you interesting people in the community, some of whom you may already know or know of, others that maybe you aren't aware of, who are doing really important and interesting things in the community and making contributions to our quality of life in the best of ways. And that certainly applies to our guest now, Joseph Hochreiter, who is the, welcome Joe.
Well, thanks for having me, Bruce.
Who is the still fairly new superintendent of schools at Hendrick Hudson School District, and everyone knows him as Joe, right? That's right. And I saw you, of course, it was about a week ago when you spoke at the Hudson Valley Gateway Chamber of Commerce, and I was really struck by your demeanor, which I found to be very engaging. You could be both light as well as talk about important, relevant topics, including what you feel is your agenda, your general agenda going into this new job. But I think, Joe, what strikes me and probably other people is that you have been a superintendent. You came from the Elmira School District, and you're not exactly one of the older superintendents we've seen. And when I saw your background, it really is somewhat startling, all of the things you've already done. And you seem to be on a very fast track, and not only in terms of your career, but in terms of what you want to accomplish as an educator. And so one of the things I just wanted to ask you is it's no secret you're, I believe, 35 now, yeah. Right? When did you become an administrator? I know you were a principal before becoming a superintendent.
I think it was right around my 25th birthday when I was first offered a job, and it was exciting and dynamic. I applied to be a middle school assistant principal. I was a high school teacher for 3 years and applied to be a middle school assistant principal. To get my feet wet and understand what school leadership and administration is, and worked for an outstanding superintendent in a small town, Dansville, just south of Rochester. Right. She's very innovative, she was very forward thinking, and our philosophies aligned. And where she wanted to take the district was in a similar fashion. I think that my experiences and leadership led to supporting the middle school. So right. It was a job I didn't expect to get. And at a really young age, I learned what school leadership was about. I learned about educational policy. I learned how to communicate with teachers, with parents, with students to hopefully drive an organization to a place that they wouldn't otherwise go themselves. And absolutely loved it, and have no regrets about moving from moving into school leadership from being a teacher.
So you were a classroom teacher at the time. Are you saying you didn't apply for the job that they asked you to?
Oh no, I applied
You did
for it.
apply. Yeah, right,
I
right.
certainly didn't think it was one of those things. I'll apply for it. I'll get the experience. I'll learn what it's like, and certainly wanted the job, but didn't think that I would really be a competitor for it. I was a high school teacher for 3 years.
Right.
25 years old. You know,
Yeah.
you certainly have much more to learn. But it was a perfect fit and a great marriage, and very thankful for the opportunity.
Yeah, and just on a personal note, my daughter, who was 23, is just now becoming a teacher. She went to SUNY Oneonta,
Yeah.
and she just fortunately landed what they call a permanent substitute in the Katona-Lewisboro district,
Okay.
which is also a very good district. So I have a personal interest in this whole profession. One of the things I noted in your background that really jumps out, two recurring themes. One is technology, and the other one is that you seem to focus on wanting, even in maybe junior or certainly senior year of high school, to introduce certain students to college level curricula, right? And looking at some of the things you've already accomplished, in a fairly short period of time, you've developed partnerships at Elmira or in the Elmira district with Cornell University, one of which, again, on the technology side, used video game technology, which I'd like to hear a little bit about. And then also, there were 40 students in this Upward Bound program that I guess were taking college preparedness courses.
Yeah.
And I think anybody who's sort of paying half attention to what's going on in the country, education has really come, I would say, under fire lately. That in terms of America's status in the world, hasn't exactly gone up; it's actually gone down, right? And so it seems like your focus is on improving education in many different ways, right?
Yeah, I think what sticks out as a personal philosophy or principle really centers around the concept of relevance.
Right.
And when you look at the rate of change inside organizations, whether it's public organizations such as school districts or in the real world, in the business world, the rate of change outside of schools is much greater than the rate of change inside schools.
Right.
Walk into a high school or a middle school and it looks a lot like it did 10, 15, 20, 25, 30 years ago. Bells are ringing, kids are moving, we're teaching chemistry for 30 minutes, then a student plays an instrument, then they go to English class and learn about British literature. 40 minutes later, maybe they have lunch. And kids are moving around so quickly, and we have so many great demands on their time and on ours that you really wonder if we're preparing them for the next step. So I've had some great opportunities to work with higher education, to work with the business community, trying to bridge that gap. Because let's face it, in education, and I'm an example of it, my professional jobs have only been in education. I enjoyed going to school. I loved it. I was good at it. I was successful. I was involved. I come from a family of educators. So when you're graduating high school and you're thinking about a career path, if you didn't have some of those relevant internships, or you didn't have someone pushing you to look at different fields, the one occupation is education.
Right.
Because as a high school senior, you just spent 13 years in it.
Right.
But what you don't know is you don't know what else is out there.
Right.
So I've worked with some great school folks. I've worked with some great educational leaders and some think tanks on trying to close that gap, and also trying to make, as important as relevance is in the classroom, trying to make college more attainable for students who come from families who have never been. So that's not a dinner table conversation.
Right.
Or to make access to different colleges easier for students by partnering with community colleges or four-year college or universities in the high school, so they can graduate with 15 or 30 credits under their belt and they understand what the rigor of college is. So it's been a career of fruitful partnerships, but also confidence that as a school district, when you sit down with the business community, you've got to listen to all the things that aren't right,
Right.
and you have to have a commitment to trying to fix it.
And is that part of your philosophy too? I mean, I do see it in reading about you, wanting to engage with the local business community, and which I think a lot more school districts should be doing.
Yeah, and I think that principle was instilled at a very, very young age. As I mentioned, I come from a family of educators. My sister is a special education teacher and administrator. My mother was a teacher, and perhaps most significantly is my father. He worked for the state education department and BOCES at the same time. And BOCES provides services for students with particular academic or physical needs, but they also have a huge support for students in the vocational field. So in the 70s, 80s, and 90s, when he retired, my father moved around community to community building vocational schools and strengthening vocational schools. And it started from woodworking to being an auto mechanic to getting into career fields like veterinary science or law enforcement or healthcare and healthcare administration. So I grew up in a house where my father was, for lack of a better term, cutting deals between high schools or Board of Educations and the county sheriff's department, or through hospitals or healthcare providers, to give high schoolers a glimpse at what is out there and what the skills and the demands are in order to compete in those fields. So it made sense for me. On the academic end, I went to a high school, Brockport High School outside of Rochester, New York, where you could spend part of your senior year not only taking college classes, but on a college campus. We shared a fence line with the state university, and if your grades were up to snuff and you were a student who had good time management skills and all those important things, you could spend your morning at the college campus taking classes with real live college kids in lecture halls with professors, and go back and finish your day at the high school, or vice versa. Start at the high school, get some of your classes out of the way, and finish your day on the college campus. And I'll tell you, you learn a lot about yourself, and you learn a lot about what college is like as an 18-year-old 12th grader in high school. And that has opened many doors and opened many eyes for a lot of kids. And it's those experiences that I've tried to replicate, because I know they're good for kids, because I was one of them and my friends were among that group. So it has certainly become a passion.
And I know recently I've heard from friends of ours whose children are going off to college as freshman year students, incoming students in college, that you do hear some students have a problem adjusting. They may transfer out of the school. They may, of course, occurrences where they'll come home and take a sabbatical after maybe one semester. So it seems to me that's what you're describing is a really good sort of an antidote to that they can get a taste of it. And I mean, would you say that a byproduct of preparing them for college in the ways you described might be that they don't want to go? Maybe that decision is, this is not for me.
It's not for me, and I'll tell you, it saves a lot of heartache, pain and suffering, and a lot of dollars. Sure. And one of the great things about what we do in our high school at HenHud and high schools across the region or across the state is we have the rigor. We have college level courses. We do. We have college level teachers. We absolutely do. What you don't have is a college level social experience for those students. So they may walk into any of our high schools in the region, take an AP chemistry course, AP physics, AP calculus, and have a college level academic experience. But then the bell's going to ring, and they're going to go to their next class or their study hall, and they're going to goof around in the hallway and do all the things that high school kids do, which is great. But at the end of the day, it's a high school. And what we have found in some of our partnerships and building programs in my past capacities is you'll learn more about college readiness when you're on a college campus and you wake up at 8 o'clock and decide, am I going to go to my class at 8:30? Why I should or why I shouldn't. Or if you're going to play video games after lunch with your buddies instead of going to your 1 o'clock class. So that on-campus experience is hugely important, because that's where you learn about yourself and time management, and if you're not at class, a professor's not going to call you or your parents. And if you do poorly on a test, a professor's not going to pull you aside and say, let's talk about this. The onus is now on the student, and that's a huge gap and a huge bridge that we need to gap between 12th grade high school and freshman year of college.
No, that's a very good point. Another controversy in education circles and in this country in general right now is charter schools.
Yeah.
And you mentioned, and you've been involved in initiating alternative school programs, and the charter school comes under that rubric of alternative. And in fact, in Peekskill, where this studio happens to be located, there's a group of people who want to establish a charter school. So what are your thoughts on that?
My thoughts are charters work, and the research is clear that they work in big, comprehensive cities that have a real hard time creating excellence in their public schools. And the research I'm most familiar with comes out of Stanford, and it talks about New York City, talks about Chicago and LA. That by and large, charter schools in those three big metropolitan areas are oftentimes more successful than the public schools for a lot of really good reasons. We know that in New York State, a lot of charter schools have failed outside of New York City because the rigor's not there, because the parental support's not there, because the financing isn't necessarily in order, and also because they can't provide the wide range of experiences that a comprehensive high school can.
Right.
On the financial end, on a public school financial end, charter schools are eyebrow raising because when a student from if a student from Hen-Hud were to go to the proposed charter school in Peekskill, with that student comes the financial resources.
Right.
The issue is that unless you have enough students in the same grade level leaving Hen-Hud and going to the charter school, you can't make up for that loss of income or revenue at the school ends. It's not a one-for-one sort of relationship. So there are big issues. And then lastly, I would say that the flexibility that charter schools have in terms of academic program, in terms of parental accountability. If public schools had some of that flexibility and regulatory relief in terms of school year or school day or vacations, I think you would see public schools really start to perform well.
Right.
The issue is there are some archaic rules and regulations that prohibit that charter schools receive the regulatory relief from. So, my position is let's all play by the same rules, and I think you would see the need for charter schools diminish in certain parts of the state.
And you were saying that your father worked for the state education department. I mean, and that's where that has to come from, right? I mean, there has to be some very fundamental changes, or to use sort of a hoary cliche, paradigm shift in the state education department and the way it's run and their whole philosophy, right?
Well, yeah, and I think there needs to be a paradigm shift that one size doesn't fit all, and you can't paint everyone with a wide brush. For example, the current reform initiative our commissioner and governor have engaged in is really powerful and will produce great outcomes and opportunities for kids.
Right.
The implementation stunk, the timeline stunk, and the lack of resources has really inhibited the positive implementation of it. But the issue is, and what the commissioner and the governor is saying, and I don't disagree, is saying that we have failing schools in New York State and that we need to address those failing schools. I couldn't agree more. But then drive your resources and your policies to those schools that are struggling the most, and let successful schools continue to be successful and continue to operate with the staff that they have, the leadership structure, with their boards of education and community, and let those schools have local control, because the local control yields good results. That's why they're not in trouble. So I think the state is struggling with this one-size-fit-all mentality, and it's really a shame, because there are great high-performing schools regionally, locally, and those schools need to be left alone and continue to do good things for kids.
Right.
And that really is the issue. When I meet with our regional and local superintendents, which I have over the last couple weeks, they, and I included, are really upset that there's a sense that we didn't do anything wrong, yet we're getting kind of slapped. We're getting punished and slapped on the hands with the same rulers as everybody. So if there were differentiation, and if there were an opportunity for districts to say, look how well we have been doing, look at the resources we have in programs for kids, if we could be left alone and let those local communities control the trajectory of their district, I think you'd see, you wouldn't see as much resistance.
Right, and that, I would call that the educational equivalent of home rule.
Yeah.
where local towns or municipalities in certain areas can overrule state level or even federal legislation, where it would help the town or help the economy of the town. At a different Hudson Valley Gateway Chamber meeting, and I just want to mention the Hudson Valley Gateway Chamber of Commerce, which Debbie Malone is the executive director. They do a great job, and they have monthly meetings, and they always get a great turnout. Earlier this year, they had somebody make a very brief presentation who was from the charter school that is being proposed in Peekskill, and somebody from the audience. I go to these every month. I didn't recognize the person. Somebody from the audience, when the Q&A segment came up, was very combative and argumentative, and clearly was trying to discredit the concept of charter schools. And at the end of the question or the answer to the question, she got up in a sort of a huff and left, and I turned to the person next to me and said, "Who was that?" It turns out it was somebody from the teachers union in the Peekskill School District. And one of the things also I gleaned from your background is, you're wanting to work very productively with the teachers union. There was a movie that came out, I think it was last year, Won't Back Down, that created a lot of controversy, and that teachers union certainly weren't very fond of and felt it distorted, what they do in their role. So what are your thoughts on that?
Well, I have met with our teachers union a handful of times. I have met with all of our teachers in the various different settings. And my phrase with them is it's not us against them. For a lot of reasons. One is the the teachers union outnumber me. So we've got to find common ground, and I think that it's two conversations that you have labor relations, contract sort of things. Are we following the same rules, and are we consistent? That's a different conversation than are we supporting teachers? Are we making sure we have the right resources? And are we giving accolades to people who are doing really, really well? And are we giving supports to the folks that struggle? I would like to keep those conversations separate. Too often they blend in, and great teaching or poor teaching becomes a contractual issue when it doesn't need to be. Right. And I get it that we all have a job to do. I represent the board in terms of the contract and implementation, and they represent 200, 300, 400 members. For the most part, I am absolutely looking forward to working with our folks. I don't think anyone got into education to do bad things for kids. But I also know that for folks who have been in the profession, I'll use my father as an example, a lot of things have changed, and it's changed really, really quickly. And I think the biggest change that are impacting teachers union is the influence and the amount of government intervention or control or what have you, and the fact that the local teachers union, the superintendent, board of education, and communities no longer have that local control or local flavor over what can really happen in the school district. Right. And that freaks people out, freaks me out, freaks our board out. A study was done not too long ago. When you look at a school budget, almost 80% of the school budget is to pay for mandates that the state or the federal government have. So I think that we're much closer to working together than we are against each other, but I also understand that we all have a job to do, and unions get a bad rap. Not sure why, but I think it's about the relationship that we have, and I have a great relationship so far with our staff and our teachers union, and hope that sticks around for a good long time. Yeah, no, that's great. And in terms of talking about things like unfunded mandates, and we were talking a little bit before the show about one of your counterparts in the Lakeland School District, Dr. George Stone, who happens to be a musician and has a band called Unfunded Mandate. So we certainly know where he stands on that issue. And one of the most fun, I guess I would say, little tidbits I saw about you is that when you were principal. And the school jazz band didn't have a drummer, you became the drummer, right? I mean that really says something about how you want to get in there and not just be a top-down kind of administrator. And I became the drummer, and we went on some of the best field trips ever in the school's history while I was the principal. That was really what I wanted to do. I wanted to be a music teacher. I give my parents a lot of credit for making sure I listened to Paul Simon, James Taylor, and Eric Clapton, and not some of the other junk that was out there in the 80s and the 90s.
Right.
I was made fun of in school because of it, because I'm listening to Paul Simon's Graceland or Eric Clapton Unplugged at a time when my friends are listening to heavy metal or what have you.
Right.
But it's music has always been a passion. It's one of those things. It's like golf or tennis. It's a skill you'll have forever. That you'll forever cherish. And when I became a high school principal, one of the first conversations I had was with our music director, our instrumental music director, and asked, kind of introduced myself and said, look, call on me. I'll play in the marching band or whatever, because it's important. It's important that kids don't see this suit who's a principal or a superintendent is this paper pushing bureaucratic sort of guy. If you want to know the temperature, you need to kind of be inside the thermometer.
Right.
And that was part of my really part of my philosophy and all the jobs I've had is to really roll my sleeves up and be a part of it. And he said, well, we've got all these kids, we've got a great rhythm section, but we don't have a drummer, so on and so forth. I said, well, I'm your guy. He goes, well, you're just being polite. We rehearsed every week. We did a recording. We recorded a CD one of the weekends between Christmas and New Year's, and sold it as a fundraiser.
Oh, that's great.
Went on some great field trips, and my agreement with the director and with the kids was that I'll put my badge away. I'm Mr. Nobody. I'm not your principal. We're gonna have fun and make music, and that is. That was a real special time in my career and something I'll forever cherish. And so far this year, I'm signed up to play. I don't know if I'm playing the tambourine or the triangle in the middle school band, but in the spring I'll be on the African drums as well.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
And and I hope you do this. You were mentioning to me, it's just a thought that in terms of Dr. Stone's unfunded mandate, you'll form a band, and you can have a battle of the bands between superintendents.
Yeah,
and
we're gonna take him down. Is what we're gonna do. I
hope he's listening.
Yeah, well, I hope so too. He called me out in a meeting we had the other day. He said he has his eye out for me. But that's a great opportunity to apply what you've learned, and that you don't need to be a music teacher in order to be a musician, and that's a powerful message for kids. But we're slowly gonna put feelers out inside the school districts to see who wants to start a band, and we had some thoughts of a Battle of the Bands fundraiser for both of our education foundations, and that would be a great way to celebrate, but also to share with the community that we're more than just a guy at board meetings and a title. We have other passions as well, which create a direct link between what we're trying to do in schools and our personal and professional life.
Yeah, no, that would be great. I mean, there is, in Yorktown, there has been for a number of years a battle of bands of student musicians, so that would be great. Yeah. And as I knew would happen, because there's so much that we could talk about and that I wanted to talk about with you, and I'd love to have you back on the show.
Great.
Because there's a lot of things we didn't get to, like online courses and what you want to do with athletics and the arts in the school system, which is one of my passions, talking about both of those. But it occurs to me, just in wrapping it up, that after reading all about you and now after talking to you, that you're a superintendent of schools who doesn't just want to superintend. You want to be, in my phrase, you'd want to be an agent of change, which I think everybody who is in your school district should be excited about, and I would think would want to really work with you on that.
Yeah, well, thank you, and that is absolutely what I believe in, and reaching out to the chambers you mentioned, and Lions and Rotary and all the other groups. I think we all play a role and we all own it, and it's going to take a little bit of everyone to keep moving the needle and to build those partnershims.
Right.
And, and that's important. And lastly, I'd say that this isn't a job; it's a lifestyle.
Right.
And being indoctrinated into that earlier, I think, is helpful. That you're always on duty.
Yep.
You're always on call, and look forward to landing a permanent resident, being a permanent resident in the district.
So we got to go. Again, good luck, and I look forward to working with you myself.
Great.
Thank you for watching Frank Talks with Bruce the Blog. Our guest has been Joseph Hochreiter, the Superintendent of Schools in the Hendrick Hudson School District. And remember, when Bruce the Blog listens, people talk. Thank you.
It's a half hour.
And